Well, hello, I'm Chadwick, and this is lesson 3 in my 3-part mini course on Find a Point. Find a Point basically uses Locator 3Ds on the Fusion page of DaVinci Resolve Studio to do things like corner pinning, or we can actually use it for rotoscoping as well. And this tutorial is going to focus on stabilized rotoscoping to take care of this chair problem we have in front of this screen, as well as we're going to cover in the next chapter will be about color space for compositing. And if you stick around until the 3rd chapter, I'm going to go over clean plating reflections, which is almost never talked about on YouTube, to get those perfect soft edge, defocus edges so that the colors just match. If you're up for it, let's get started. Stabilize rotoscoping using a Locator 3D. So in the last lesson, we actually kept our point cloud, and I wanted to keep that because I want to point out something. No pun intended. If I plug my point cloud back into the Merge 3D, load this into the viewer, and again, if you can't see the whole scene here, just right click in the viewer, go down to overscan, and choose something like 1.5 or whatever. Maybe even, I'll do even more overscan than that, maybe 2. So you can really see everything that's going on in here. Well, I'm looking for a point cloud point that's stuck to the chair to use to help me stabilize my roto. Basically, if the computer already figured out the movement, then I don't have to go frame by frame trying to manually line up a mask, which is going to have jitters in it by nature. So I'm going to let the computer do most of the work. That's kind of the point of stabilized roto. It's really hard to see the points on here and what might be attached to that chair because a lot of it's behind the chair. So what I might do in the inspector is change this to point and maybe even decrease the sizes a little bit. And I'm looking for any sort of point while looking through the camera over here that's stuck to the chair. And I do see one that's sticking out to me. It's this yellow one right there. Appears to be stuck to it. It's not, unfortunately, close to the rotoscope area of the chair. And I don't really see any in this area. And this is probably going to happen a lot on foreground occlusions now that everyone has full frame sensors and everything's like super shallow depth of field. You probably won't have stuff for a lot of that. But if you do, I'll show you the way you convert a point cloud point into a 3D locator, which we can then use, of course, over in 2D space, is pretty simple. You select it. I'm just going to draw a box to like lasso select that point. And then I can right click on it, come down to Point Cloud 3D, and at the very bottom, we have this option that says Create Locator. And once I do that, you'll see that just basically plopped down a Locator 3D. It gave it the name of the point, and it also gave me a Merge 3D, which I don't necessarily need. So I'll just select that, I'll trash that, delete that. I don't need it plugged into my point cloud, in fact, and I don't even need my point cloud over here anymore, so I'm putting that back over for safekeeping. And then if I want to use this locator in the 2D comp, I just need to wire this up to the camera again, so it would go from, my corner pinned located points back into the Merge 3D. And so now I've got this as a locator that has been published out in 2D to use for rotoscoping. However, like I said, you probably won't always have a point from a point cloud for something that's in a foreground occlusion because we got soft defocus lenses. So we're going to do Find a Point one more time in an area that makes more sense to try to stabilize and get movement for the image. And for me, that would be probably somewhere up here in the corner on the edge of the chair because I can see a line in here. And we can use our Find a Point, even if it's not pixel perfect across the thing, it's going to get the general movement for us and do most of the heavy lifting. So the way Find a Point works for Roto is basically the exact same way, but at least in the first couple steps. So rather than using this one here, I'll just go ahead and trash that. We'll build our own using our Find a Point method we learned in lesson 2. So Shift Space, Locator 3D is going to give us the opportunity to place our own into the scene. We're going to set up our 2 different viewers again. I'm going to load my one viewer is going to be the camera renderer. And the Locator 3D needs to have Make Renderable on so we can see. I changed the color on the screen replacement or the corner pins to green just so we can see something different here. And then I need a second viewer so I can see like perspective or top view of the merge of the actual scene so that I can position the Z position of that point. I'm going to hit F to sort of fit this in. Let's change this one to perspective initially. Use Option, middle mouse to sort of scroll around. And I need to get this thing positioned onto this chair. And I'm going to do it from the very last frame. So for the rotoscoping, I'm going to reference frame, let's see, it'll be 1046 if you're following along. And what I want to do is get this positioned somewhere on the corner here. And to get more visibility on this hard edge, I am going to turn on the viewing LUT, which is going to allow me to just have more contrast and see a little bit more into the image. It's like a microscope. And I'm just going to do that by holding this waffle button here, and it pops up the gain gamma sliders. So this is just going to allow me to gain up the image a little bit. Maybe even I gamma down. I'm looking for something along this line of pixels, which is like the edge of the chair. And I'm going to pick a point on here and try to just match it up across 2 frames to find this point, because it's more useful than something far away from where I actually want to stabilize for the roto. Basically, let's get this locator in position just like I did before. Actually, let's rename it first. We'll call this one chair. And we can just pick it up and position it. So I can do that from over here. Or because this is going to be on a frame that I'm going to set up aligned to the camera, you can also go to the transform settings in the inspector and just be moving the X and Y positions. Let's pretend that is our point we could actually identify. No, this is not an actual point in space we could really lock down because it's a smooth curve, but it's going to be good enough to get us going. Next, on this sort of reference frame, I'll go ahead and point this out in my notes here. So we'll call chair roto ref is 1046. On this one, I'm going to do the same as before. So we'll use target, so we get this point facing the camera exactly, because right now it's definitely not. So we're going to go use target, and then the X, Y, and Z, we're going to connect that to the camera position. So right click on X, connect to camera 3D1, X offset, and then Y, connect to camera 3D1, Y offset, Z, connect to camera 3D1, Z offset, and so that's all lined up there on that specific frame, and then we just remove the animation. So I right click in this sort of gray area, I come down to remove all from target group, and that is taking the animation off, so I can go to another frame to triangulate that position. And really what I want to do is just actually move it to the area that's useful to me, which is right when the chair moves off screen. So basically I'm looking to line this spot up exactly the same as the chair moves off screen, which is, let's say it's right here, and I need to kind of move it into this space while we use the perspective viewer Z-axis to move that into space. So if I come back over here and let's change this right click to top view, we can actually see this a lot better. And I just want to move this. It's moving closer and closer to camera here to right about there. So that X right there, it's white on white, so it's a little bit tough to see. Actually, let's change the color of this so you can see how you can change colors of locators. Let's make this locator blue so you can see that a little bit better. I'll disable my gain gamma sliders, and we can sort of see how we've got a locator 3D placed directly on the corner of that chair, which is perfect for stabilized rotoscoping, which is what we're going to use this for now. So I'm going to close up this second viewer because I'm just going to be working in 2D space from here on out, so a very comfortable place for us all to work, right? The 3D stuff can be a little bit confusing as you're starting out. But what I want to do is I want to take this point here and basically do an inverse transform on it so I can stabilize the scene roughly around this point to make drawing the mask so much easier. So the way that'll work is I'm going to grab a transform tool from my toolbar, or shift space XF is our little shortcut for the great fusion transform, which supports concatenation. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed the original image in to the transform and stabilize it so that I can draw on like a stabilized version of everything. Let's grab from the color space transform that I had up there, which was just turning into Rec 709. And no, we're not going to finish in 709. I just wanted to not deal with viewer LUTs quite yet. Transform tool. Load that into the viewer. The way this is going to work is the center position. We're going to take the center position here and invert it from the Locator 3D. Very, very simple concept. So if I right click on center in the transform and I say connect to chair position, what that's just done is given me the animation, like 2D coordinates of that offset, basically of that chair position. And then I just want to invert it so that it basically stabilizes around that point. So if we take a look at this in the viewer, if I put my cursor there where that point was, where I had sort of manually assigned it, see how everything moves around it? This is essentially, if you've seen tutorials that go into what's called locked off stabilization, and they use the point tractor set to BG only. This is the exact same thing. It's using a transform tool to do it. And it's a little bit more simple to deal with when you're going from a single locator 3D into 2D space. So this is the way I prefer to do it. Now we can actually draw our mask on this stabilized version, and then we just reapply the motion afterwards. So in order to draw the mask and do that, I'm going to do that. Maybe I'll just start at this last frame, 1046. I'll grab a B-spline tool. It's the best sort of tool that you want to use for this sort of shape here that has nice smooth curves. And I'm going to just click. Make sure you're viewing the transform that's been stabilized. And again, that's connecting the 3D locator and hitting invert transform. And now I'm going to go start drawing. So it's really just less clicks is generally more. So I'm going to do a point there, a point there. Let's do one there, one there, one there, and then just kind of close it up. And Shift-O is a good hotkey to close it up. And then at this point, I would go in right away and hit Shift-M, which says we're going to modify points only. So that way I don't accidentally click and make more points along the way. That can get messy quickly. And I'm going to align this a little bit better so that this curve follows a little bit nicer. Okay, so something like this. And actually, I'm going in here accidentally and trying to click that point. You don't have to do that with these roto shapes. If you just hold Option, it'll grab whatever point is closest. So it's just an easier way to deal with drawing masks and shapes and stuff like that. So let's say this is pretty good for our first frame. It's already set up for rotoscoping. If you look at the inspector over here, that diamond is turned on, it's enabled. But how do I actually apply this? Because I don't want to apply this to the transform. What I want to do is I just want to work on a mask only, and the mask only tool in Fusion is called the Bitmap tool. So what we're going to do is apply this to a bitmap and then invert it, so we're only dealing with this stabilized version of stuff for a mask only, not color. So Bitmap tool, Shift Space. I told you this is more advanced, but hey, this doesn't exist out there freely on YouTube, and I'm like, let's open up the floodgates. Let's stop gatekeeping and make everyone a little bit better. So I'm going to feed this into the image input of the bitmap, and the bitmap's responsibility is just to make a mask out of anything. And what I want to actually do here is I don't want this to be what I'm working with initially. What I want to do is I actually want to plug the B-spline into here as a mask. So the nice thing about bitmaps is you can combine masks together. But the default when you plug a mask into the bitmap is the paint mode is set to merge. I just need to change the mode here, so the way these two interact, and I'm just going to change it to multiply. So basically it applies this exact shape as a mask, but I'm going to look at this image here while I'm doing it, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. Bitmap is basically plugged in this way with these colors, and it's set to multiply. That's the key. All right, so let's actually take care of the animation because it's not doing all the movement for us, but it has substantially reduced the amount that we need to follow the image along. So you can see here, it's pretty close, but it's not perfect. But the more the computer can do, the better off you'll be. And this is a much smoother curve than doing something like a magic mask. So I'm just going to step through until there's a significant part where that green line is not lining up with the original screen. And I would say it's actually does well, this is not going to need too much to fix. I would say at this point down here in this section it slips a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the points and use what's called the box mode. If you hit Shift B for box, I don't know if it's called box mode, it may just made that up. This is basically a corner pin control over that whole shape. And when you're doing rotoscoping, you never really want to move points. You want to move edges, you want to move overall shapes. So what this is allowing me to do is holding Shift down as well, I can grab this corner and do basically a corner pin on that shape to get a really nice smooth adjustment to the shape. Maybe I'm going to take this over here because there is a perspective shift. We're going to just try to line that up a little bit nicer. And you can see it laid down a keyframe because auto keys are already set up on things like B-splines and polygons. And so we can see that edge with just 2 keyframes is holding pretty good. And I don't actually want to do too much more than this right here. Maybe right here this could be let's see. Well, I'll do one more keyframe right here. The less keyframes you do initially, the better. But let's just hold Shift while that box is selected and maybe make a small tweak. But if we take a look at the bitmap, you can see how smooth this animation is overall. That's going to give you a really nice result. I mean, what we do is we take this transform, we take a copy of it, we paste it after the mask, and because this was a mask, it's going into the mask input. That's not what you want. You want that going into the yellow background of this transform. And actually, when I copy it, it doesn't take the connection that we had done to the chair. So what we do need to do in this one is we'll uncheck invert, and we need to reconnect this. So the center position is going to be say connect to chair position, and now this movement will align with the original scene. And see how much that moves over time? That would be way harder to sort of track versus stabilizing it to do your masking and in using what the computer's already offered for you by combining these methods. So let's take a look here at the overall comp. This merge right now is basically taking the sRGB version of the original footage with the corner pinned version of the screen replacement. So how would we get the chair back on top? You could just take this mask, stick this into the mask input, and then it's backwards. So just if you wanted to invert that, just go to the merge. We have an option on the settings tab of the merge to say apply mask inverted. And now we've got some roto, really clean roto. It's way too clean though, by the way. You can see there's no fall off here. So a simple solution to that is just come back to your B-spline, change the soft edge to not be 0, and just hold the command key down or control key on Windows to give this a little bit of feather. And if you do it with turning the controls off, you can maybe see things a little bit nicer. So I'm going to go up here. The hotkey is going to be Command K. And make sure you turn this back on because you'll think your controls are broken when it's off. But if you have that off, when you're dragging these values, you can kind of see things a little bit better. And so that is a much, much closer fit than it was before. Right here, the line isn't perfect, and I'm trying to teach you as best as possible how to do this. And so I want to pull that line off again. I turned off show controls, so I need to turn it back on to actually make the change on screen. So show controls or Command K will get you there. And so I'm just going to take this point here, hold, and just sort of pull that out a little bit more. And there we go. We've got rotoscoping done. And now most of you will say, hey, this is good enough. This is done. We could ship it. In fact, if you want to just go ahead and turn on the motion blur here for this corner pin, you could certainly do that. That's going to add more realism. So I'm going to my corner positioner, settings tab, turn on motion blur, and now it even looks more realistic. But those of you that are more eagle-eyed are going to notice, hey, that edge color is not quite right. So we're going to deal with color spaces for comp in the next section, and then we're going to deal with this edge glow and not do the traditional thing you see people talk about, which is just eroding it. We're actually going to properly clean out the background reflection in lesson 3. If you're up for it, stick around. Let's now take a look at color spaces for comp. In this little section for the lesson, we're going to convert everything into linear so that we can composite things correctly and then restore it back to the original log so the colors has everything to work with as far as dynamic range goes. So the way that will work is rather than our log footage being converted into Rec 709, which was great for the tracking purposes, at this point, we're going to just focus on the compositing aspects, and we can just continue to use this same node here, but change a few things about it. Rather than the output space being 709, 709, we're going to leave the color space gamut, the primaries, alone, which means we're going to leave these at Sony S-Gamma 3 Cine, so those have not changed. Input color space and output color space are the same, but our output gamma is going to be linear. So if I start typing LIN, that'll get us to linear, and we do want to disable tone mapping when we do this. So basically we've set up linear for the main footage here. Now we need to get our screen inserts that are sRGB also into that S-Gamma 3 Cine linear space. The easiest way to do that is take the original color space transform, Command C, click the screen insert, Command V, it pastes it right afterwards. The inputs are incorrect on this, so we just need to change those. So I'm going to change S-Gamma 3 Cine here because the footage is coming from sRGB. We're going to change the input gamma also to sRGB. And then this is correct. Our output, basically our working space, is to work native as possible. The only other thing that you need to do with sRGB, I think, let me know if I'm wrong about this, is apply the inverse OOTF. That seems to make everything just look more proper. Now, it doesn't look super correct in the viewer over here yet because we don't have a viewing LUT on for S-Gamut 3 Cine Linear. So you do that by turning on a little waffle viewing LUT, and then we make sure the settings are correct. So if I click the drop down, use color space transform, that's the best way to do it, I think. Click edit, and then our input should be what our outputs are over here. So our input should be Sony S-Gamut 3 Cine Linear, and then 709, 709, and DaVinci. So that's basically our viewing LUT. The input here should match our output over in the inspector. So with it off, now we've got a proper looking image there for Rec 709, but we're working completely linear. This is the image it's actually operating on, so it's operating super photometrically. To finish the composite, before we go back to media out, what you do is you take your footage color space transform, you Command C it, you come to the very end of your comp, Command V it to paste it, or Control V, load that up in the viewer so you can see what's going on, and we just hit the swap button. That's the nice thing about the CST is it has an invert swap button. We can turn our viewing LUT off, and this is basically the exact same color of everything as the original. It's just we've integrated any sort of screen replacement, and then this would go to a shift space media out, which I believe we deleted in the first lesson just to keep it out of the way. You come back over here to the color page, and basically I'm applying on the color page my OpenDRT 709 conversion. So I've saved all that range in the composite. Clean plating reflections. So if you shoot screens completely off in black, which is really the best way to generally do it, you're going to always have issues with defocused foreground occlusions. It could be a finger, it could be this chair here, especially if you're going to use add as a method to add the reflection or light back on top. So we're going to clean out these reflections using another stabilized technique that uses perspective positioner from our original corner pin data. So the way it's going to work is we're going to grab a perspective positioner node, shift space perspective positioner, and this node is going to receive the original footage. And basically what we're going to do is still use those 4 corners we had originally done, and this time rather than find those corners to place something in, we're going to stretch them out to make it easier to paint out the edge of this chair. So perspective positioner, right click, top left is going to be connect to, screen left, top left, position, top right, connect to, screen left, top right, bottom left, right click, connect to, screen left, bottom left, screen left, connect to, screen left, bottom right. Basically, we're just lining those up. You can see as I've done that, it's basically like stretched everything out. It's like a UV. It's unwrapped that whole screen so that I can more easily get rid of this chair here, which is not part of what I want to add back into the scene. I don't want to add a double up this bright line here, which is creating a glow if you see this in this merge here. And a lot of compositors will just say, oh, we'll just erode that edge. Well, you can't always do that, especially if it's super defocused. You can't just eat away at pixels. You need to fix what's behind and in front, that color mix problem, right? So this is a good way to do it. After we've basically unwrapped it, we're going to do an edge extension, or we're going to do an in-paint. I got a whole course on in-painting here on YouTube to get rid of that. So to do that, I'm going to use a clean plate tool. There's several ways you can do this. This is a pretty simple method. I'm going to grab a B-spline tool, and the B-spline tool is going to be used as a garbage mat to grow those edges. If I just click around the section of the chair that we need to remove, and then basically roto that over time. So I'm just going to do a quick manual roto of it. By let's just take this, move this off screen. I'm holding Option. Let's just sort of go in between a little bit. You don't have to be super precise with this because it's just a reflection pass that we're concerned with. I just don't want it to be in this first part of the shot where I don't need it necessarily. And what we'll do is we'll take this mask, feed this into the garbage mat input of clean plate. And then you've got 2 options to sort of fill this in. One is click the grow edges and fill, and that gives you a little bit of a hash pattern. The other one is the grow edges, which is like a vector straight diagonal of those. That could also work pretty good. In fact, let's just go as far as we can with that, and we'll hit fill for the rest. The main point is is that we're only doing it where it's necessary, and especially we're only doing it where it's needed, where there's like an edge of the chair that's important to take care of. In fact, right here, it looks like I'm getting some weird coloration. So if I option drag that around a little bit, we'll make sure that that reflection pass is truly just a reflection pass. If I turn the gamma up, we can see a little bit better what's going on. All right, so now we need to get this back into the corner positioner, basically this node right here where it placed them back into position. And we can do that. We can just take this corner positioner that we have already linked up to the Locator 3Ds and do an instance paste, like a mimic link. If I hit Command C and then Command Shift V or Control Shift V, it's basically, this is like intrinsically linked together. So what I've done here, I don't need the inputs on it. I just basically want to take this, which is an instance, so it's the exact same as this one, and just take the clean plate output into here. And now we basically put that back into its proper space. So here's the original. Here is basically our cleaned up version. See, we've gotten rid of this chair. So we're not going to add the light of that chair is kind of the idea. So how do we do this? The merge right now is doing 3 operations from before. We had this set to merge, set to screen. Another more aggressive option that works in 0 to 1 ranges is called linear dodge. That can sometimes work, but because we want to do this as photo accurate as possible, leaving this to apply mode normal over on this one, we'll get rid of our roto. And this is basically just an A over B. There's no reflection, nothing special is happening with the lighting. We haven't done any color or anything to it. But on top of this, we're going to add a reflection pass. How do you add a reflection pass? You got 2 options. One is channel boolean set to add, and the other one is the merge node with the alpha gain slider turned all the way down. I'll just do merge because, you know, it's a little easier to get your head around, I think, as long as you learn about the alpha gain. And so this is going to take our reflection pass, which is just this, go right over the top, and rather than normal mode with over, well, actually, we do leave all that the same, but to do add, we just take the alpha gain, slide it down to 0, and now we've added the light texture back on top of the image. Now, how do we restore the chair? Very simple. We just moved the original full image on top and then mask that off with our roto we had done in the earlier part of this lesson. So another merge is going to restore the actual original pixels, which we want everywhere, but not really everywhere, because everywhere would be back to ground 0. We just want it to be affected just on this little patch of roto that we had done. So this will go into the mask input of that merge. And now we have edges that are not glowing at all. Okay, we do have a little bit of smearing here because I was a little bit lazy with my clean plate here. So if you can see if I really sort of stretch this. The thing about gain and gamma sliders is they don't lie. If you turn them off, you can kind of get away with a little bit more. So I may come back here to this clean plate. Let's see. Yeah, you can see I'd gone a little bit further out than I probably needed to. So I might take those points, move them in a little bit tighter so we don't see so much of that stretching. But that's the beauty of this, is you can kind of keep iterating and like put things into place and then refine as you go. That's not too bad. The colors all match here. The grain's not perfect because I did a little bit of stretching, but you could also do denoise, regrain techniques I've taught several times here on YouTube. If you want to QC this against other insert images, it's a good idea as you're waiting to get your final graphics. So like I taught in lesson 2, just select the node you want to replace and then select the image in your media pool that you want to replace with. Hold shift, drag it on top, say yeah, I want to replace that. You can see these edges should hold no matter what that new color is because it's just A over B and we're adding the light back on top. I've stretched my gain gamma, so if I just hold that back to normal, you can see we've got really, really nice edges completely across the scene. And all the color is available to work with on the color page because we put everything back into log and everything should just work nice. Last couple things I'm going to leave you with is you need motion blur on the insert for sure. So what's moving the screen? It's this corner positioner. So make sure you go to your settings, turn on motion blur 5 or 10. We're not seeing it in this viewer right now because I right click down here and turn it off to see better previews. But if I turn that back on, you should see the motion blur. Again, motion blur works best when we're working in linear. You can see all that nice grain and light from the original. The other thing would be dealing with the edges are probably a little bit too sharp on there. We could deal with that on the source with a rectangle, a little bit of edge softness, as well as a little bit of defocus could be helpful. As we wrap up this mini course, I just want to give you a quick overview of what my node setup is doing. We got media and footage. We're going into linear, which we didn't do our tracking in linear. We just did our compositing that way. We've got our camera 3D over here. All our locators that we manually did our find a point method in are over there as well. Those are all going into a merge 3D, and we located those using our camera renderer that came out of the camera solve from lesson 1. Now everything else is done in 2D pretty much. So if we take a look down here, our first merge is just A over B. So it's an over operation with the merge. We're not doing anything else other than resizing it to make sure that the plate matches the resolution of the comp size, so 4240. The next thing after that normal merge, rather than a screen merge, is we're adding the light back on. The light is being added with another merge. This merge is set to alpha gain, set to 0. So that's the only difference in this merge than the other one. It gets all those light reflections, and what we're adding back on is a cleaned up version of the reflections. And that was cleaned up using perspective positioner and the clean plate tool. And after we've added the reflections back on top, we add the entire image on top again for the patch of roto of the chair that we had stabilized. So this is coming back all the way from the top. The original image is going back on top, except for the area that we had cut the roto with our stabilized roto technique. So that's getting masked off. The mask always affects what's ever in the green input, if that's something that you were unaware of, which I wasn't for a long time. So maybe you are too. And then the final step of this is just to invert the linearization that we had done. So it's a copy of the top color space transform. That is just hit the swap button. So we're going out of linear back into S-Log3. So the image will look like this when it's ready to be color graded over on the color page. Thank you so much for sticking with me today. My name is Chadwick. This channel is called Creative Video Tips, where I try to teach all the things you're not going to find in an AI Google search and are really powerful high-end compositing and editing techniques. Because there is so much more to learn, I can't wait to see you in the next video.